Welcome to ECW Living Dangerously 2007, the first pay-per-view of the ECW on FX era, and for that reason probably one of the most important shows that we've done to date. Of course, there are now more eyes than ever on ECW with this new deal, and that means more potential pay-per-view buyers. Pay-per-views have been a very big part of our profitability and success over the first year. As you can see, we made a decent amount of money every month, but November and January, obvious spikes there in the amount of money that we made, and that is down to the pay-per-view revenue, which has been pretty huge. If you look those 2 months, we would have barely made any money had it not been for those pay-per-views. As you can see in February, we've not done that well. The costs have gone up since we went to Cult, and that means that we now need to make more money to ensure that we're not going to have any troubles financially because there's $6 million in the bank, but you certainly don't want to be making losses because long term, of course, that's not sustainable. Before I actually get into booking the show, we have a locker room incident. I've been waiting this, almost expecting it. Teddy Hart, a negative influence backstage, and he's finally sort of proved the doubters wrong by picking a fight with Nigel McGuinness. I think this is the second person who's picked a fight with Nigel McGuinness. Obviously not liking him getting a strong push out of the bat. I'm not going to fire him or suspend him, but getting physical, I think you have to hit him where it hurts. That's in the pocket. An actual positive impact, so that's really good to see. I'm very happy with that. He's happy, has a morale boost from being fined. I mean, you can't fault that. CM Punk's happy, obviously, because he hates Teddy Hart. And we've got some other incidents, but nothing really of note. Xavier and Joey Styles love classical music, and a few guys passing on tips and hints to their proteges. I'll now get into booking the show. Of course, there might be more eyes on the product than ever before, but that means that we have to deliver to an even better level. People might have been interested in buying the pay-per-view, but if it isn't any good, people are going to be much more skeptical about buying one again. So hopefully Rhino v Rob Van Dam can deliver. And the pay-per-view begins with a video package promoting those two competitors as well as everybody involved in tonight's show. It's not so much talking about the individual rivalries, but looking at the big moments of the first 8 weeks of ECW on FX and putting over more our roster than the matches themselves. Of course, we'll get into them in more detail later as the matches come up individually. Rob Van Dam returned to ECW. CM Punk was defeated by Jerry Lynn, both on the opening episode of the show, and Rhino has been a dominant force throughout the first 2 months, the entire 2 months. Of course, that victory over Brent Albright, which took less than 2 minutes. We also see Xavier winning that cage match, loser leaves ECW against Sonny Siaki, and the brutal attack administered to CM Punk by Paul Burchill. It gets the show off to a strong start, gets the crowd hotter, unfortunately losing heat to our main event segment, but it's an okay video package as we go into the opening match. The commentator is putting over, we are going straight into the action with a good opening match. Happy to see them. It looks like they've all raised the game for the pay-per-view actually. Ricky Reyes the weak link, but a 65 from Xavier. That's the potential that I always saw in him finally coming to fruition. Low-key with a 69, Rocky Romero with a 71. Unfortunately a minor concussion. Hopefully that doesn't keep him out long enough that we have to vacate the titles, but it's a good match and the Havana Pitbulls win in 50 minutes and 25. Rocky Romero defeating Xavier. The story of the match pretty much being Xavier isn't 100%. 10 nights ago he had that brutal steel cage match against Sonny Siaki, which took both physical and mental toll on him. As a result, he was unfortunately the one who was pinned, and despite that win on the first episode, the first ever match in fact of ECW on FX, Loki and Xavier ended the undefeated run of the Havana Pitbulls. But it was the other way around tonight and the Havana Pitbulls get their win back. That is 1-1, so perhaps there'll be a third match between them down the line. But the Havana Pitbulls stand tall, avenging that defeat that I just spoke about. Loki is obviously frustrated to have lost, but checks on his partner in the ring. This is the thing with like the Hustle guys. They're really not that over, so when it's a celebration angle just based on their overness, it really doesn't do well. But the matches and their in-ring performances have come on tenfold, obviously raising the game for the pay-per-view, but really encouraging signs, especially from Xavier, who if you look back at a video from maybe 9 months ago, was absolutely terrible. He looked a bit like a no-hoper. He looked like the dead weight of the Hustle. Of course, Sonny Siaki had the menace that we could build on and never quite capitalised on that, but Xavier doing brilliantly in recent months since we started pushing him basically. So again, it was probably my fault initially for having him being basically the jobber of the Hustle. We then get a interview on the topic of tag team action still, Regal talking about the showcase match later tonight. Bryan Danielson and Nigel McGuinness set to face TJ Wilson and Harry Smith, the Stampede Bulldogs. It's a really good promo from Regal, of course. He works the crowd well, and while little Guido and Chuck Palumbo were added to the match 3 nights ago, Regal prefers to talk about the new Hart Foundation. He's more interested in putting over their training, their lineage, the fact that their bloodline is one of the greatest ever in the history of professional wrestling. But he does put in a little heel remark that he never did like the Hart family. Tonight, Bryan Danielson and Nigel McGuinness will show that it doesn't matter who your family is, because when you've worked harder than everybody your entire life and your entire career, you end up being the best. After the entrances for the second match involving the 2 people on screen, Lynn and Brent Albright, Lynn takes a microphone and annoys Brent Albright, basically saying that he's not the priority, he can wait because he wants to promote the main event, and puts over his associate Rhino and the fact that it only takes 1 Gore to settle the score. Lynn is obviously enjoying being a bit of a troll, annoying Brent Albright, and Lynn pushes his buttons even more, saying that it's only going to take 2 minutes, just like it took Rhino last month. Lynn working the crowd well and improvising to his advantage. It's a very good promo for Lynn. He's normally quite bad on the microphone, probably a fair rating within the game because I've seen some of his promos recently and it's certainly not his strong point. Nonetheless, it's a good promo that fires up Brent Albright going into the match, and that is the story. Lynn thinks he's going to have it easy, but he certainly does not throughout the course of the match. Brent Albright bringing him close, a couple of roll-ups that get a near fall. Lynn gets worried, he gets frustrated because he's not finding it as easy as he thought he would, but does eventually pick up the win in 10 minutes 10 with a cradle pile driver. A 45 for Brent Albright. It's not really good enough from him. It seems like a lot of the roster have pushed on to the next level since we came to FX. Brent Albright hasn't. Again, that's a sign of my pushing because I haven't done too much with him. Lynn with a 58, which is okay, about what we expect and certainly want from him on a weekly basis on TV. He's done that on pay-per-view. Hopefully he can put in decent performances on FX now, because in at least one of his first few matches he has dropped down to like 40 something, which really isn't good enough as well. Following his victory, Lynn escapes the ring. His celebrations are quite muted because he's uncomfortable with how close Brent Albright pushed him. The commentators put over that the shooter went toe-to-toe with a former ECW world champion. Lynn hasn't sort of been presented as this serious competitor so much since he came back, but he is a former world champion and his experience is the difference in the end. We are then shown a door in the back, which is the locker room of the Extreme Horsemen, and talking over that, the commentators put over Paul Burchill's match with CM Punk later in the night. Joey Styles and Taz say something interesting was caught earlier in the night, and as luck would have it, the door opens as they say that. Allison Danger, the sister of Steve Corino, but the girlfriend of Burchill's opponent tonight, is seen leaving the locker room, Taz suggesting that's a little bit suspicious, and the last thing that Punk would want to see this close to the match. What has she been saying to the Extreme Horsemen? She doesn't come out looking angry, dishevelled. She's actually a little bit shifty. So the tease there is that Allison Danger may have reconciled with her brother, and can CM Punk trust her going into his match with Paul Burchill. We then get a video package that takes us back to Guilty as Charged ahead of the third match, where the hooded man threw a substance in the face of Tommy Dreamer, resulting in him losing the last chapter match against Raven. Since then, the hooded man has stalked Tommy Dreamer, albeit inconsistent in his appearance. Recently, Dreamer challenged the man to fight him on pay-per-view. It's a poor segment just rated on Tommy Dreamer's overness, and it leads into a pretty poor match actually. Not that I expected much. The hooded man just tries to evade Tommy Dreamer throughout the course of the match. Pretty similar to his match with Paul Heyman at Heatwave, albeit much shorter. Tommy Dreamer doing okay. The hooded man, what you'd expect from him, he's not an integral part of the show, so it doesn't really matter what he rates. And Tommy Dreamer, we just got him a dominant, decisive victory in 3 minutes 50. He chased him round, caught him, hit him with a Dreamer DDT, because of course the match itself is secondary to Tommy Dreamer, as he now has the hooded man exactly where he wants him, in a position to pull off the balaclava. He'd been wearing a hood recently, but for the match he had a hood and a balaclava on. Dreamer revealed the hooded man to be Devon Storm. It's not that exciting, and it's perhaps not what Dream was expecting. There's a sense of anti-climax in terms of the commentator's reaction, probably the crowd and Tommy Dreamer, until a voice is heard over the microphone. The person speaking isn't seen, but it's unquestionably the voice of Raven. He says, "You seem disappointed, Tommy, but you shouldn't be surprised. There are hundreds of guys who you've crossed in this business, and every single one who didn't kiss your ass, they all despise him. You can take Devon down, but Raven knows that when one goes away, there's always another ready to pop up." As he says this, another hooded man appears behind Tommy Dreamer and hits him with a chokeslam pretty quickly. There's no mystery this time as the man voluntarily unhoods himself. Kevin Fertig is back in ECW. We haven't seen him since the first show of 2007. He was pushed quite heavily but didn't do a very good job in ring. He was a bit of a flop, it's probably fair to say. He stands tall in the ring, a different look for him, but he is going after Tommy Dreamer in his return. We then head to the back. Rob Van Dam interviewed to promote the main event, his ECW World Championship shot against Rhino, and he improvises well in what is a very good promo, but he's showing some concern initially for what happened to Tommy Dreamer just then. He does get himself back on track and puts over Rhino, thinking that he's doing something that nobody's ever done before, and since he's so keen on bringing up history, Rob is more than happy to do the same. Rob Van Dam says that 7 years ago, he was forced to vacate the ECW TV title through injury. He never lost that belt, he was never beaten, and last year, he had to vacate the ECW World title. Same story, he never lost that belt. So when Rhino wants to talk about those titles rightfully belonging to him, he needs to remember that the only reason he ever held either of those titles, let alone both of them at the same time, is because RVD wasn't there to stop him. But Rob Van Dam is back, and he is feeling better than ever, and that means that Rhino can go back to his role as a secondary figure because Rob is the whole fucking show. He is Mr. Pay-Per-View and he is Rob Van Dam. So gaining heat to the storyline, a really good segment as we go into the fourth match of the night, the tag team showcase. Bryan Danielson and Nigel McGuinness, they've burst on the scene with impressive victories, as have the Stampede Bulldogs as part of the new Hart Foundation. That's TJ Wilson and Harry Smith. The FBI interjected themselves in the match, and if we're honest, they were there because I didn't want either of these teams to lose and we needed a fall team. The FBI were that. Bryan Danielson making little Guido submit in the middle of the ring to the cattle mutilation. The commentators put over the brutal look of that submission hold. Nigel McGuinness off his game again. Harry Smith also. That's not very good to see, but it is a pretty decent match. They've all been pretty good matches so far actually. Nigel McGuinness with a 64, which is good. If he's on his game, that means he can probably get high 60s, maybe 70s. Bryan Danielson, absolutely excellent with a 72. Decent performances from everybody else. I'm happy with that match overall. 6 good performances, and it really shows how far our mid-card has come since we debuted on FX. Previously, our mid-card was guys like Balls Mahoney, Tony Mamaluke. They're pretty much never to be seen, rarely making appearances, losing on FX. That's our level of mid-card now, and that is a really promising sign for the future of the company. Nigel McGuinness and Bryan Danielson stood tall in the ring after the match. I forgot to note, but William Regal was added as a commentator to that match, and he put over all 6 men really. Like that promo earlier, we didn't want to put down his opponents, but Regal's job is of course to make Nigel McGuinness and Bryan Danielson look like the 2 biggest stars in the company. Regal left the commentary position and applauded the 2 men as they stood tall separately on their pay-per-view debut. The idea we're putting over is that they are 2 supremely individually talented performers. They're not really clicking as a team, but at the moment that doesn't matter because they're just simply so talented. We then get a video package promoting CM Punk and Paul Burchill, probably the secondary match on the card in terms of build. Obviously, the main event with their title is the biggest, most important match, but this is definitely just below that. A rivalry which also involves the sibling feud between Allison Danger and Steve Corino. Since Allison arrived on the scene, having begun that relationship with CM Punk, Steve has had issues with both of them. He demanded that Allison Danger stay away from ringside for her own safety during CM Punk's matches, but she went against this at Guilty as Charged and was hit with a pile driver through a table from the apron by Rhino. Steve Corino puts 100% of the responsibility for that on CM Punk and some of it on Allison actually, to be fair, bizarrely absolving Rhino of any of the blame. This led to the suggestion that Corino simply has an agenda against the pair. He wants to further his issues with CM Punk. This has put further strain on the family relations, understandably. Corino trying to split up the couple. Paul Burchill has done much of Corino's bidding throughout the rivalry. That's why he's the one stepping in the ring and caused further damage to CM Punk's ribs in the build up to this match. Punk actually beat Steve Corino a few weeks ago, but now has probably a tougher task in terms of the kayfabe ability of the 2 because Paul Burchill is undefeated going into the match, having never been pinned or submitted in ECW. We've got a few too many people we can say that about, so probably not something we want to push too much because of course we're putting over Rhino as undefeated. If we've got 4 or 5 undefeated people, it's not that impressive, but Burchill is probably the favourite going into this match against CM Punk, who has struggled in recent weeks. He's lost a couple of big matches and he'll want to bounce back with that. It's a good match, a 68C+, and a good pair as Alice in Danger and CM Punk show great chemistry there. CM Punk got a 74, so he's back up in the ratings. I don't know if that's just the pay-per-view boost or because we gave a bonus to everybody that meant that his morale was back up to a reasonable level. Paul Burchill disappointed me a little bit there because I know he's capable of better, but it is an okay performance. Good wrestling and decent reaction. The story of the match is these two going hell for leather. Steve Corino is at ringside. Alice in Danger is not there. Of course, Taz subtly hinting throughout, is there something going on? Is she going to side with the Extreme Horsemen? Steve Corino tries to get involved, but Alice in Danger comes down, proves all that wrong because she slaps Steve Corino in the face. Corino can't believe it. He's offended that she'd do that, but of course she's just protecting her boyfriend and trying to make sure that he has the best chance of winning. Corino, in a fit of rage, stiffly slaps Alison back. A shocking moment. The commentators can't believe what they've just seen. This distracts CM Punk. The match goes on for a few minutes after that, and while it's not a direct responsibility for him losing, it can be said that he's kind of off his game from that point. Paul Burchill hitting a gut-wrench powerbomb, not the C4 that it says there, to pick up the victory, and it's another defeat for CM Punk. It might seem like I'm trying to hurt him because obviously I've said that he's going to be leaving in about 6 months from now really, but it's not that, it's just we want to continue the story with CM Punk. We're going to change his gimmick because I've been getting that note, and this is the perfect way to do that. I'm really happy with where Punk goes in terms of my plans for the next few months, so don't worry about him losing another match there. After the match, Steve Corino looks to get Paul Burchill to the back as quickly as he can. He just wants this to blow over. He knows there's going to be a reaction to this. He's in shock at what he just did to his sister himself. Corino obviously regrets his actions and looks quite skittish and worried, having potentially scarred his relationship with his sister forever. Alison is up before CM Punk, who of course was hit with a gut-wrench powerbomb, and checks on her boyfriend. He's in a really bad way. Those ribs, that injury aggravated even more, and it's been an awful night for the couple, all things considered. The commentators can't quite believe what they just saw. We kind of skip over it. They're somewhat pensive about discussing what happened because it is such a serious incident. We then cut to an interview in the back for the main event. Rhino laughing off the words of Rob Van Dam, saying there's a subtle difference that Rob Van Dam failed to mention. Rhino then changes to his more intense style, saying that when Rob Van Dam lost the titles, it's because his body gave up and he couldn't continue fighting. When Rhino lost them, it was different. It was because ECW couldn't continue fighting. But ECW is back, and he has made everything right in the world. Tonight, there's only one way this pay-per-view ends. Gore, Gore, Gore. As Rhino looks to leave the interview set, he is approached by Paul Heyman, who tells him that just so he knows, to give him a little heads up, Jerry Lynn will not be permitted to join him at ringside tonight. Rhino is understandably furious, having had his game plan thrown out of the window very, very shortly before the match, but before he can act, Heyman scurries away, probably for the best because Rhino probably would have battered him. It's a decent segment. Paul Heyman normally does better than that. Rhino improvising badly. I really should probably start scripting his promos. I don't even think he has a problem with scripting his promos, and they would be better because he's not the best improviser. We then go into the second last match of the night. It's a decent match but not much heat. Unfortunately, it was a mayhem match, which the booking apparently doesn't sit well with the crowd, but as far as I'm concerned, those are some of the better performances we've seen from them. I really am not taking notice of that thing that we get in the road agent report, because despite the overbooking apparently not sitting well with the crowd, it definitely offsets, it definitely helps cover up the shortcomings of the guys on the roster, so it's a net positive, I think, from what I've seen when I've booked matches with that note. Homicide getting better at his gimmick. The match did get the crowd buzzing, so hopefully we can get them to a higher level for the main event, but Teddy Hart picks up a victory over Homicide. Recently, Homicide has been struggling to keep the hustle together, losing Sonny Siaki, having lost Xavier and Loki before that. He's defeated here by Teddy Hart, and that obviously isn't going to sit well with him. As Teddy Hart celebrates on the turnbuckle, Homicide looks immediately to get his revenge, jumping him behind, being a complete sore loser. The Hustle leader lays into Teddy Hart rather viciously, shooing him in on the canvas. It's a sloppy assault, but it obviously leaves Teddy down on the mat. TJ Wilson and Harry Smith run down to help him, but the damage has been done, and Homicide leaves through the crowd. We then get a video package finally promoting that main event, And it goes back to the end of Heatwave 2006 when Rhino made his ECW return, taking out both CM Punk and his opponent Rob Van Dam with a Gore each. Since then, that move has been completely protected, nobody's kicked out of it, and he set out to take back what he felt belonged to him. At Guilty as Charged 2007, Rhino became the dual ECW World and Television Champion, cementing his place as leading ECW into the new era on FX. He looked to consolidate his position, attacking CM Punk at the end of the debut episode. However, he didn't count on the surprise return of Rob Van Dam. He had only lost the title due to the injury from Sonny Siaki that kept him out for 3 months, and RVD was back. He had his sights on the ECW World Championship. That match will of course happen in tonight's main event. The undefeated dominant champion, whose last title defense saw him retain the TV title against Brent Albright in under 2 minutes. One of the shortest matches that we have seen, if not the shortest match we've seen in the 13 months since ECW came back. Already a force in ECW, already a legendary figure in the company's history, Rhino has gone from strength to strength. The video package leaving us with the simple message that all it takes is one Gore to settle the score. It's a decent video package, but it loses heat to the segment. I hope that it doesn't have too much of a bad effect, because I'm hoping for a very, very strong main event. This is our first pay-per-view on FX, as I said earlier, and we need it to deliver. It's a C plus 68, so it's good enough, but it's not blowing me away. It's not exciting me. I'm not happy with that. It's okay. Rhino getting a 65, Rob Van Dam with a 72. The storyline gaining heat, whatever. But the match sees Rob Van Dam and Rhino back and forth, slow building the match actually. It's about the evasiveness of Rob Van Dam, how quick he is, and he's probably the only guy in ECW who can avoid the brutal, intense offense of Rhino. Eventually, of course, he gets caught. We see Rhino dominate much of the match. Rob Van Dam makes his comeback and sets up for a Van Terminator, I think it is, the one where the coast to coast that Shane McMahon calls it. I don't know if that's the Van Daminator or the Van Terminator. I think it's the Van Terminator. I'm pretty sure it's the Van Terminator. Nonetheless, that doesn't matter, as Jerry Lynn comes down and tries to knock RVD off balance. RVD hits him with a sidekick that sends him down. He regains his balance and goes for the Van Terminator, but Jerry Lynn manages to get in the ring at the last moment and blocks it. He sacrifices himself and takes the brunt of the steel chair for himself, allowing Rhino to avoid any impact from the move. Rob Van Dam gets back up, and Rhino, having had chance to survey the situation, hits Rob Van Dam with a brutal Gore. That's all it takes, as we know, as we've put over throughout the show. Rhino making a successful first defense of the ECW World Championship. Rob Van Dam is back, but it is a defeat in his first big match. He probably isn't done, because obviously Jerry Lynn had some effect on the finish of the match, but as Rhino has his hand raised, he shows gratitude to Jerry Lynn, helping him to his feet, dragging him to the back. The question mark remaining: can anybody stop the dominant Rhino? Since he came back 9 months ago, he has beat everybody in his path. He is the dominant champion of ECW, and there is no doubt that he is the number one name in the company right now. He stood tall at the top of the ramp to end the show, as RVD sold his rib injuries, having been taken down with that brutal Gore. So it's a 68 C plus show. I'm quite happy with that overall. It's, I think, maybe our 5th best show, maybe 6th. It increased our popularity in 40 regions. And I think overall, again, I said this at Guilty as Charged, it's probably our best overall show in terms of everybody stepping up to that level that we need. Quite a few of those matches could be main events of ECW and FX, and we'd probably still reach the 62. That's what we need, more people at least on the level just below main event that we can put in with Rhino and Rob Van Dam and CM Punk and have very good matches. I'm going to do a post-show speech. I'm going to thank CM Punk, compliment him, praise him for a great performance, because he did really well. Rob Van Dam was the other good performer on the show, complimented on a good performer, and Loki actually in that opener was really good, so I'll compliment him as well. They'll all be happy with that. But of course, the focus now switches to ECW on FX, episode 9, which has to deliver. And I'm sure the pay-per-view has met all of our expectations. It's got a 201,000 buys, which I don't even know if that's any good, to be honest. I can compare it, I think, to other shows that I've done. I'll see actually if as far as I can tell, the pay-per-view providers are all happy with what we've seen. Rocky Romero injured there. I'll have to check how much that will keep him out. But I'm also, before the episode ends, just going to look where this leaves the show in our... So it is, yeah, like I said, the 5th best show of our run. None of the matches getting into the top 10, I don't think. only the third best in terms of attendance, but it is the best buy rate that we've done. So in terms of profitability and the money that we've made, I see that that is a very good thing. Only made $500,000. It's an improvement on the previous month, and we go into April now continuing to be better than TNA. They're not even a relevant factor anymore, I don't think. Our pay-per-view, much better than their last pay-per-view. Everything we've done, blown them out of the water. So much so that they had to go to another time slot on Spike. That was pretty much over. Not really sure why I brought it up. Just to gloat, really, that ECW is doing really well. Might not have been as good as I'd hoped, but we are still delivering, and ECW on FX Episode 9 is coming soon, and I'm sure it's going to be another great show, just as important as a go-home show for a pay-per-view. I think the one right after a pay-per-view has to build the momentum, has to be the one to say that this next pay-per-view is going to be even better, and hopefully we can continue to raise the stakes in ECW with that show.